This is the Guns Magazine podcast, episode number 71. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. Before we get started, let's talk about our sponsor, Berger Bullets. Berger builds match-grade rifle bullets and ammunition for target, hunting, and tactical shooting applications. Proudly made in Mesa, Arizona, Berger uses the highest quality materials, tooling, and production processes to produce the world's most accurate bullets and ammunition. Berger is unequaled by the competition and has established more long-range world records than all other manufacturers combined. To find out why our nation's elite operators, competitive shooters, and hunters all trust Berger to shoot better, visit your favorite retailer to experience Berger's uncompromising quality or learn more at burgerbullets.com. Well, today's chat was inspired by my recent Insider column in Guns Magazine, where I waxed poetic about the neighborhood Army-Navy surplus store. We got more mail on that story than anything we've done in a while, so it was apparent our audience really has fond memories of their days at the local surplus emporium. To that end, I called up Mark Patricevic, the owner of World War Supply, one of the leading suppliers of both authentic and reproduction military antiques. We had a great informative chat, and afterwards he was even nice enough to send me a German grenade display for my man cave. How cool's that? Now here's my talk with Mark Petricevic about the world of military antiques. Well, good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Brent.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and obviously near and dear to the hearts of many of our readers. I always call it Army surplus, but I know militaria and military antiques and et cetera, and we recently did a story about that, and it got so much reader mail that obviously with guys of a certain age, the entire topic is very near and dear to their heart, and you are the head guy at World War Supply in Michigan. So how did you get involved in this field in the first place?
I always had an interest in military history from a child. And then just before I went in the service, I bought my first surplus rifles. I really didn't have the money growing up in the Rust Belt. Everybody was laid off, and it was just real hard times being in Michigan in the 80s with the auto industry.
Yeah.
So I was able to finally secure a old 1903 Springfield with matching, with a nice bayonet with a leather sheath and original sling and everything for a whopping $150. And this would have been in about 1987. And that really solidified my interest. And then I spent 4 years jumping out of airplanes for Uncle Sam with the 82nd Airborne. And I spent every time off that I had visiting historical sites, as I was fortunate enough to be stationed in Europe. So I got around wherever I could, seeing historical sites, and my interest just grew from there.
Very cool. So, and it is now a very active and well-known business. Before I embarrass myself further, so what is the right term? Army surplus is obviously what guys call it, but is it militaria? Is it military? What do you call it in the office day to day?
Militaria.
Okay.
We just look to reproduce. A lot of the original stuff is gone, unfortunately. We get some original stuff here and there, but the bulk of what I'm doing is we're selling stuff. A good 1907 sling, which is common on the Grand in Springfield, is 150 plus nowadays, and you're not going to want to be carrying it out in the field because it's 75 plus years old. And so we make a really good quality reproduction to go on like that Springfield. That was my first rifle. Because those slings are few and far between right now.
Well, and that's a good point that I was getting ready to hit is your company, it does sell authentic or original type stuff, but you're best known for your reproductions. And going through your website is just amazing. I found German SS cyanide pill containers and all kinds of other crazy stuff. Where do you get the models or the originals? Is this collection you have, or how does that process work?
I collect quite a bit of it. Otherwise, we literally travel around the world. We've been in Nanjing, China, where the Nanjing massacre occurred, checking out the amazing museums over there. We've been all the different museums of Europe. I know a lot of collectors. I was very fortunate to meet a lot of the World War II generation before they passed, and got to speak to quite a few of them and befriend quite a few of them. And wherever we can find things like that is what we do.
Well, and I'm thinking of that pill container. It's one thing to find somebody that can build web gear for you, but some of this other stuff is and it looks so original. I mean, you probably just don't go down to your machine shop and say, "Hey, build me this." I mean, how does some of that work?
Well, we try to secure, of course, an original if at all possible. And we have a team of engineers that works on it. So we spend a considerable amount of time and treasure on product development. Well, like, for instance, we just came out with World War I German stick grenades, 1915, 1917 models, which are considerably different from the World War II versions. So we really spent a lot of time researching, and we had access to some originals because the World War I ones are very hard to find. And got some drawings made and sent those. And we have some manufacturers we've been dealing with for years, and they were able to manufacture them from basically the CAD drawings that we had made.
Well, before we get too far down the rabbit hole, I need to ask you the big think question, which is, so why does this stuff intrigue you? I ask 10 people and I get 10 different answers. What is it about holding an old piece of web gear or an old helmet that just somehow really speaks to you inside?
Well, my family always teases me about it, but I say I can feel the history. I can literally pick something up and I can feel history in there. I can almost imagine what would have happened, with right now I'm looking at a Japanese Marine helmet from the war with the original net. I can just imagine what would have happened when that helmet was captured.
Wow. I'm just in awe just sitting here thinking about it. So this is going to be a hard question for you, but of all the stuff that's come through your hands, there's got to be a couple that really just made you go, "Oh, wow."
Yeah, just a lot of items, and I get trying to pare it down is the biggest problem. And I think a lot of people run into this. They want to be collectors of everything to begin with, and that just doesn't work. You have to kind of narrow it down, and I've narrowed it down to firearms. And for my personal collection, I have the firearms and try to get the original slings and bayonets. Is kind of where I limit it to. And I don't try to get every different version of like the M1 carbine. I don't need a Saginaw, a Smith Corona, etc. I don't need all the different ones. I need just one, the paratrooper and the regular. That's what I try to limit it to. But for the business, we get examples of all the original items to ensure their accuracy, they're made accurately. The only way we differ on the accuracy is no one's a size 30 waist anymore. So we increase everything. Like the original World War II suspenders, if we were to get them made, no one's going to fit in them nowadays because your average guy was 5'4" back then, about 120 pounds. Yeah, and that just doesn't work in today's market. So we make things longer for today's heftier GI.
That's funny you say that. I have my one of my beloved grandfather's World War II uniforms, and I don't think I would have fit in it probably in 8th grade. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, they were coming out of the Depression. They didn't eat very well, and that stunts your overall growth.
Talk a little bit about, this is what always intrigued me, especially as a young guy, a child, going to the Army surplus store. Where did all that stuff come from? I guess in the back of my head, I thought, Joe that ran the place took his pickup truck down to the local military base, and they just shoveled it in with pitchforks. And I know how that stuff gets into the non-military market now has changed. Talk a little bit about some of those changes you've seen over time.
Well, growing up, you would go to the store and they got it from what I come to find out would be auctions. A lot of it comes back in. Now the government's not selling a lot of it. That changed a couple administrations ago where they're really restricting sales. And there still are some auctions up, but it makes it very hard, makes it cumbersome. And you'll show up and you'll have bought say 10 pallets, and you got to have a common carrier show up to pick it up. They're waiting forever, and it's on your dime, and you're only going to get 8 of those 10, and they don't much care that you didn't get the other 2, and it might not even be the ones that you ordered because it's the typical government employee shuffling it out the door. So The market's really changed there. A lot of the stuff that I'm dealing with is stuff that has come back that we've lent to allies after the war. It stayed there with the government makes an agreement. Okay, we're going to give you. We had a whole bunch of World War II shovel covers come back, the 1943 shovel covers. They were on loan to the former Yugoslavia, and then they had to offer them back to us when they were getting rid of them. And so that's how they got back. Right now, there's a whole bunch of M1 carbines and M1 Grands sitting in South Korea, waiting to get permission to come back to the States, and that's been for quite a few years. That's how most stuff comes back now, is from foreign countries that has been on loan from us for their gear, which a lot of them made similar gear to us. So the U.S. has really restricted sales lately.
Well, I think just about everybody could tell a story of the $99 Mauser or whatever, that they picked up. How is the weapons supply, especially old bolt actions from Europe or South America? Is that market drying up too?
It goes in spurts, if you will. You remember back shortly after I got out of the service, so it had been 90, 91 in that area. You could pick up the Chinese SKS for $80. Now those same SKSs are 400 plus. It goes in streaks. Whenever you see something new coming through, I noticed some cavalry Carcanos coming through right now for a decent price. So it all depends on what people find in those warehouses when they're going through and when those countries are ready to give them up. You never know what you're going to find out. And that's what we try to anticipate when something's coming through. We try to get the accessories ready for it so people will be able to finish their new piece on their collection off properly.
So I would guess that it's pretty important to have a pretty wide network, and you get strange phone calls from strange places.
Oh, yeah. We, over the years we've been doing this, we've gotten to know a lot of people, and like I say, here in the States and Asia and Europe, and you quickly find out you can't be an expert on everything. So if I've got a question on a particular piece of U.S. gear, I've got a go-to guy. When we were starting to get into the older stuff like the old trap doors, I knew Keith Rush real well. He had trapdoors.com. Unfortunately, he's passed. But whenever I had a question on a trap door or an accessory, Keith was my guy. I've got some other connections for all different kinds of gear. German metals, I've got another guy that's an expert on metals and uniforms. So you pick up a network over the years of people that you can trust, because you would just spend the rest of your life trying to learn one particular subject. And if you tried them all, you would be an expert on none.
That seems to be the problem of my life. But so your company's called World War Supply. Strictly World War I and II, or I was seeing all kinds of interesting stuff in your catalog.
Well, we do World War II and earlier is what we try to limit it to. A little bit of Vietnam's becoming collectible now, but there's still a fair amount of stuff out there for Vietnam, but just starting to hit. So we concentrate on World War II and earlier, which is my passion. And we're getting back into the basically anything that once it's switched to smokeless powder, we're looking at doing accessories for any of the weapons after the switch to smokeless.
Now, I run into this quite a bit where we get letters and it says something to the effect of, I don't really know guns, but we were cleaning up my grandfather's house after he passed and I found this gun and my buddy says it's probably worth a whole big bunch of money. I suppose you probably get those calls too. And what do you tell folks when, they're thinking that they've hit the jackpot because they found Grandpa's web gear from, the Pacific campaign?
Yeah, that's a delicate subject because Grandpa won the war by himself and he was only in for 2 years. So you have to be gentle bursting their bubble. But they'll come forward with a first aid pouch that they've seen some rare variant from that maybe was an experimental company that kicked a few out. And they think that thing's worth a fortune. It's only worth a couple dollars because how many millions of first aid pouches were made? Or they'll have a Luger that Grandpa brought back, and they're going to look and find the most expensive, rarest Luger that they can find, and that's what they're expecting that thing's worth.
Yeah. Now, is counterfeiting a problem? Because I know in certain other areas, knock stuff off. Is that something you run into?
Well, it's always a problem, and you have diehards in the market that only deal in original, and I say that's getting pretty rare now, so those people are getting less and less as costs are going up, and people are holding more. So the reproduction, and a lot of them won't deal in reproduction. Some guys, will deal in both. I do the reproduction, but we always mark our stuff as such where you can, when possible at least, that you can tell that it's a reproduction, like our trademarked JT&L that goes on the items. During the war, you had a particular manufacturer, like you would have had Brent's Canvas Manufacturing, and you would have had, the date of manufacture on it. Well, we trademark JT&L. That's what we put on all the gear when we can. And we clearly show the markings on here that we'll try to do so that it's going to be pretty obvious if it is a reproduction. But there's people out there, particularly with German metals, it's an issue.
Is there anything, if folks are and I'm talking to like the novice collector or the guy that maybe wants to start doing World War II reenacting, is there anything in particular? You just said the German metals, but anything else they really need to be leery of when they're starting to build their collection?
Well, building their collection and getting into reenacting are going to be two different animals. Getting into collecting, they're going to want the original, although a lot of people collect the reproduction now, like helmets. Original helmets are prohibitively expensive, so they'll get into some reproductions. But reenacting, you're not going to want to take original gear in the field. You're going to want to get the reproduction gear, and that original gear is not going to fit you. Like I said, the M1936 suspenders aren't going to fit your average guy now.
Yeah.
The pistol belt, they say most people had a 20-some inch waist at that time period. The pistol belt's not going to fit. The 23 grand belt's not going to fit them. So they're going to want to go for that reproduction gear for two reasons. A, it's going to fit better. And B, they're not going to want to ruin that original gear that's getting fairly expensive.
Great point. I wouldn't have thought of that. I chuckle thinking of me trying to fit in some of this gear because 20-inch waist was many, many, many decades ago.
Exactly. I pulled up some information a little while ago, and if memory serves me right, I think the average GI in World War II was 5'4", about 130 pounds, and I think his waist was about a 28.
Wow, that is something. So, sticking with reenacting, though, how big is reenacting? When most people think of reenacting, they think of Civil War, movies like Gettysburg, and your local historical association will have a little Civil War encampment. But World War II is actually a pretty popular thing.
It is. World War II is picking up. There's a few people that do World War I. We were quite surprised by that as well. But World War II is big. In Europe, it's really big. But here it's gaining a lot of popularity. There's some big events down in Ohio, a couple fairly big events here in Michigan, and as well as others across the country. It's picking up steam. People are really interested in history, and they get a very good feel for it when they're out doing that. And the reenactors truly enjoy sharing their passion with people who are interested, so they can come see what the equipment looks like on an actual person being used versus looking at a mannequin from 12 feet away at a museum. That
then carries into, you guys have a pretty significant resume of movies you have supplied things for. How did you guys kind of get into that business?
Just a phone call out of the blue. We get a phone call, and typically they don't give us much notice. More often than not, they spend more on shipping than they do on product. We were involved in Amazon's Man in the High Castle, which if you're not familiar with it, it's an alternative history piece where the Axis wins the war and occupies the states. And I got an emergency call from a producer that he had to film a scene that he was still planning a week out, and he needed all the Japanese helmets we have overnighted to Toronto.
Okay. Good planning there.
I said, give me your FedEx account number and they'll be on the way.
Yeah, exactly. So how many, like that example there, how many helmets like that do you get in stock? Because I'm sure you just don't, pick up the phone and I need 50 more.
Yeah, no. Everything, of course, is on the slow boat. Everything comes in, and it takes a while to manufacture these. The helmets all have to be stamped on a very large press through multiple dyes. Then they have to be primed and painted, and the liners put in and everything, and then shipped here. So it takes a while, but we shipped everything we had at that time, and I don't recall what the number was. That was a couple of years ago when they were filming. But we got everything picked up, and he called FedEx, and they came and picked up that day as soon as we were done packing.
Wow. Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and prompt you to name drop. So talk about some of the other movies and shows you guys have had your product in.
Well, another one we had relatively recently was when they remade Midway a little while ago. And that had Woody Harrelson and Nick Jonas and a couple other big names in it. And we supplied the bulk of the Japanese gear there as well. We paid attention to the Japanese sector. I had a few serious collectors. I was able to get part of their collection from them. And so we concentrated on the Japanese gear before people realized there was a war there. And what I mean is more people were interested in the German stuff for quite a long time. So we had it ready to go when the interest picked up, luckily, and they picked up all the gear for the Japanese soldiers and sailors in Midway. We supplied as well, and then we supplied a lot of prop houses, which we don't know where the stuff's going. We just sent a very large order to another prop house. So when you're filming a movie, it's kind of rare, like for Amazon and Midway, to buy it directly. They'll buy it from a prop house, and these prop houses, they specialize in having all the equipment in stock already. So the movies go there, and then they rent what is needed. And we've supplied a lot of them, and then you don't know what it's going into because you'll ship say 100 Luger holsters and a crate of the stick grenades, and they keep that in stock, and whatever it's needed, it's drawn out by the movies.
Yeah. So of the Allied and Axis powers, I would assume U.S. equipment will be the most popular. Is that true?
U.S. equipment by far is our biggest seller, by far. People love the web gear. And, I think a lot of people, too, maybe they feel guilty. Maybe they didn't listen to Grandpa or Great-Grandpa's war stories, and now they got a couple of his things, and they want to complete it. And they just like having a cool man cave, if you will. They want to finish things off and have some cool stuff around that maybe reminds them. Grandpa maybe has some impartial kit they want to finish off, or they've got the Arasaka he brought back from the Pacific, and now they need a sling and a cleaning rod, etc. And that's kind of that is the bulk of our sales right there, is selling for people to finish off a particular firearm that they have.
This is going to be another hard question for you. It's like picking out your favorite child. Of all the stuff that you guys sell, is there one or two or three things that you just look at them every time you see them and go, that is so cool?
The stick grenades by far.
Who doesn't like stick grenades?
They just look really cool, and we've made all the different versions. And in fact, we just had a bracket for the wall made that I'm looking at right now in my office that you can display the three sticks used in World War II on the bottom, and then the egg grenade from a hook on the top, and you can hang that up on your wall, and it looks really awesome.
I actually saw that on your website, thinking, where could it go in my new man cave? Because I'm moving soon, and I'm going to have a great office with we can do some video and stuff. So maybe I need to get a little grenade display in there.
That would be a great backdrop.
Okay, Mark. So I often talk about today is the golden age for firearms because we've got more great stuff on the market than ever before. Was the 50s to 1970s, was that the golden age of surplus, or today or yesterday, or when was it?
I hear a lot that, you hear the story about your father or your grandfather. They went to the hardware store, and if you bought like $100 worth of stuff, the guy would reach in a barrel and pull out a Mauser and give it to you for nothing because they were everywhere. But I would argue that the 90s and the early 2000s were a really, really good time for surplus rifles. You had a lot of stuff rolling out of Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union and its satellites, the former Yugoslavia after the Civil War over there. Beautiful teak SKSs coming out of the former Yugoslavia, absolutely gorgeous, all matching serial numbers. You could have those for 100, 125 years ago, and now they're going for 500 plus. I got a email here, I think last fall, $375 with crack stock and non-matching numbers wholesale.
Wow.
And you could originally buy absolute cherry condition, 120. They had the M48s, they had the M24 Mausers, and you could get them with the whole bayonet set still in the Cosmoline for right around 100. Now they're 550 plus. Ammo was coming out cheap too. You could get a whole spam can of the Tokarev ammo for $70. I remember buying 10 or 15 of those at $70 for 1,200 rounds roughly. Looked on Gunbroker earlier today. Bidding has not ended, and that same spam can is $605 now.
Oh, my. Well, I'm sitting here. When I was a kid, we had a great surplus store, and I had, the seventh largest privately held collection of militaria by a sub 10-year-old. But I guess it's kind of like baseball cards. Is there anything that you've let go over the years you think, why did I do that?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. But when those mistakes did make themselves clear to me, I rectified it later, although probably not to as good of a deal. But I learned a long time ago that if you're interested in something at a table, you stand there and hold it till you get the proprietor's attention. You do not set it down.
So what you're saying for our listeners is just buy stuff and hang on to it.
If you think you're interested in it, pick it up. But as I mentioned before, you have to specialize, and that was difficult for me too. Now, luckily, with the business, I have an excuse to buy more items, but I also have a warehouse to put them in, so the bride's not angry with me. But your personal collection, you need to limit it and not try to be the expert at everything. And I realize it's tempting. You see some really cool things out there, but limit to what you're good at, what you know. Because what I found is you venture out of your area that you know, and you're going to get stung.
Yeah. Of your entire product catalog, I talked about the cyanide pills container, and I saw there was, all kinds of personal hygiene stuff that, World War II German toilet paper. Of all the stuff you've got there, what do you think, in your opinion, is probably the most arcane of all?
Well, you probably hit it with the toilet paper there. It sells. It's not a huge seller, but when it sells, it sells. And what a guy will typically do is he'll go through our whole medical section, and they'll buy. I'm guessing they're doing reenacting or filling a museum. Is another dirty little secret a lot of people don't realize. Most of the stuff you see at museums is reproduction. We've sold to every major museum in the U.S. and quite a few in Europe. Because the stuff's just not there anymore. They need it now. They need it for a display because they just realized it was the 100th anniversary of World War I and got caught behind, and they need a whole bunch of stuff. And I'll get a phone call that it's ordered, and it goes out to anywhere from post museums to the big museums, all over the place. The bulk of that stuff's reproduction. So they're probably doing a medical display, and we'll sell a whole bunch of the World War II German medical stuff, and it'll go out, and it'll be in their display of items used and in an aid station or something of that nature.
Well, that's cool, but once this publishes, you might want to be careful walking out the door. There might be a dark tinted window van sitting out there with some curators that aren't happy.
That's a good point, but anybody in the business, they realize that it's not original. And I do vividly remember one call from a very famous museum in the uprun to the 100th anniversary of the First War ending, and they suddenly realized they didn't have any of the World War I U.S. helmets, and how many did I have in stock?
Wow. Surprise, surprise. It's only been coming for 100 years.
Exactly.
So is there anything for the future? You got any cool projects you're working on or anything you're looking for in particular?
You never know what the future is going to bring. We're always looking at exciting new projects. Right now we're doing some cotton webbing versions of holsters. Back during the war, the U.S. I did several experimental holsters for the .45 and for the Victory revolver and the 1917 revolver. And we've gotten a hold of some of those experimental holsters, and we're doing versions of them now. And they were all made out of cotton webbing as the government was looking to reduce costs. So that's probably the most exciting thing we've got in line right now.
Very cool. Well, we've talked about your company, World War Supply. How can people find out about it?
WorldWarSupply.com. Everything we offer is there. You can also check out our YouTube channel where we visit all these historical sites I've spoke of, and you can see what the Berghof looked like, and the Eagle's Nest, and the beaches at Normandy, and the massacre at Nanjing, and then you can see all that there, and you can also see pictures of all the areas we've been to too in the gallery.
Well, I was going to say I was doing my research before we started talking, and we almost didn't do the talk because I got kind of sidetracked and I was diving in. So once we're done here, I'm going to go back to the website and check everything out. So I highly recommend it. Well, Mark, I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us about something that we all love a whole bunch, which is surplus and militaria. So I'll check your catalog out, and you might be seeing an order here from me sometime soon.
Very good. Thank you.
I had a great time talking to Mark, and I'd suggest you take some time to visit his website and see all the cool militaria you didn't know you needed. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even those gun-banning liberals. Guns Magazine was first in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions or comments about the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out on anything by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast catcher, YouTube, and of course, at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publication, American Handgunner Magazine, at AmericanHandgunner.com. We'd also appreciate it deeply if you'd share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. And finally, I'd like to remind you to check out our sponsor, the guys and gals who really know accuracy, at Berger Bullets. Learn more at BergerBullets.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at F&G Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.